I know this is crazy. This guy's flailing his arms and doing all this stuff and talking so fast and has all this energy. This is the energy of life. What do we got, Riley? How are we doing today?
We're doing well. How are you doing, Joe?
I'm amazing. Thank you so much for asking.
All right, so let's see, because I think this touches on a lot of different episodes that we've had in the past, and so we could sort of collect a lot of different examples together. Are there examples of individuals who have pursued their dreams with self-belief and intentionality, ultimately achieving their aspirations? Like, who are your favorites that we've spoken about, or are there more that you haven't really touched on yet?
So in terms of people, famous people that we all can relate to and know, from what I can recall in this moment, the people that we've talked about are Oprah, J.Lo, Jay-Z, Beyoncé, Steve Jobs. Every one of these people didn't like. We have this conception that people are in this state of life in which they have all this abundance and wealth and this, that, and the other. And, you know, the reality is, if you look at the origin story of all of these people, they really didn't start with much. They started with the belief in themselves, you know, unshakable confidence and continuously making choices toward something that they define in their life that they want. And, you know, what was interesting is in a previous episode, we talked about Elton John, and when he was at Abbey Road Studios and he was writing songs and he was a songwriter, and he said he had no conception of being this Elton John singer-songwriter. You know, I think he was Reggie Dwight, or that's his name, right? Reginald Dwight. You know, he didn't have any aspirations for that, but he had decided that he wanted to do songwriting. And then he said he wanted to be a session musician, and he started making little steps towards something. And so that could be something that's within our own, you know, professions, within our own lives, within, you know, something, a job that we want, or something that we want to do for ourselves. And so it's really about, you know, with all of these people, understanding that not accepting what anybody says that contradicts what we believe that we want, that we've defined for ourselves, right? And that could be something huge. And if it's something huge, it's breaking that down into manageable chunks that we can actually realize progress towards, and we can actually get excited about doing little things and realizing that every moment is an opportunity to make that choice, and every moment all potentials exist. And so if we're doing something, or even just feeling the feeling, you know, because we're talking about making choices, we're talking about doing things, but taking a step back, per the mechanics of quantum physics, if we can think it and we can feel it, we have to be it before it actually becomes. And you're saying, and you're probably like, oh, wait a minute. So this guy's saying, you know, you got to think about it, you got to feel it, but then you also got to do it. Like, how does that all work? Here's the truth of the matter. It's different. It's a little bit different for everybody, depending on where you are in your own journey, and depending on where you are in your own belief in yourself, and depending on where you are in your own level of mindset and awareness, to be able to, first of all, reflect on circumstances within our lives that lead to certain things and have led to certain things. And at the same token, being able to trust that where we are now is exactly where we need to be in this moment, in what it is, whatever we're trying to do in our lives, even whether we figured that out or not. And that's okay. If we figured that out, great. And if we change our mind tomorrow, that's great too. You know, whatever it is. But being aware to the fact that we're whatever we're doing, or whatever we're thinking about, or whatever we're feeling, that we're focusing on the thoughts and the feelings that we want. And again, I've said this before, and I'll say it again, and I'll say it often. It's challenging when things happen to us in our lives, and I'll say happen to us for a moment. When things happen to us, whether people say things that completely, take us off guard, and we feel a certain way with anxiety or negative emotions in which people, violated our trust or said things that contradicted what we know is truth. To be able to stand guard and say, no, that's not so, I don't accept that. I don't accept that. That's challenging. But I will tell you that over time it gets easier. It gets easier. But the first step is being able to say in that moment and to say, I will, I'm not accepting this. I know who I am. I know what I'm about. I know my values, and I know my principles, and I know what I've accepted as truth. And I know from my inner feelings, who I am right now. Right. And I know that whatever circumstances have happened in the world, and then I'll transition to being happening for me and for us and not to us. Right. And having that perspective be shifted, and looking at things as I've said before, when things come across that are challenges, that are struggles, do we get caught up in it and then swashed like the waves? There was this quote, we'll find, I can't recall right now who said it, but it's like the quote is if you don't become the ocean, you'll get seasick very fast. It's like if you're not the ocean and you're not in command of exactly what your thoughts and our feelings are in the moment, in every present moment, we'll very quickly get seasick by the waves of life, right? And having to be part of that, right? And I'll give an example from Walt Disney. I was watching the Imagineering story on Disney Plus. Incredible story, the whole history of all of that and how that happened. And we talked about Imagineers. Can we be the Imagineer of our life? Can we do that? And then even utilize certain principles of imagination and engineering to our benefit in our life, not just in our profession, but in our profession too, if that's a good thing that we want to do. Absolutely. But when Walt Disney was originally trying to start Disneyland, everybody told him, no, this is the worst idea. Nobody's going to want to go there. It's why do you want to do that? Those places are dirty. And he said, it's because my park is going to be better than that. My park won't be those things. Right. And so he originally pitched the idea to the city of Burbank, and the city of Burbank said no. And what happened? He stormed out. It was incredibly aggravated because the city said we didn't want it. They didn't want the traffic, or they didn't want all this stuff. And so Disneyland might not have happened if the city of Burbank said yes. Right. And so these things happen, and we think of them as failures, and we think of them as these things that are completely changing the course of our path. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But if we can understand that not sometimes, but I believe very strongly, at least through my own experiences, that every time these things are happening for us to push us in a different direction, to help us understand the circumstances of something that we can learn from and then make something better, whether it's that thing or something that it puts us in a different place that we wouldn't have considered before had this thing not happened, for us. Right. And so I think those are the things that at least I've observed with these incredible people that are among the most influential that have walked among us, as Einstein has said, and as I have said many, many times throughout many of the episodes. It's really just being present and appreciating the moment, which in and of itself is a challenge. And I'll go back to which I haven't talked about this in a while, but meditation and the word meditation in of itself, if you haven't seen that episode, we are all meditating all the time. We are all meditating all the time. Meditation means to become familiar with. And so whatever we're thinking about it, whatever we're feeling, we are meditating upon that. And that creates our reality based on the mechanics of quantum physics. It's that simple. And so if we're meditating on all those things that we don't want, and we're meditating on all those things that are outside of us, and we've not consciously, in the conscious awareness, taking any moments to say, let me meditate on feeling a feeling of joy, or feeling a feeling of love inside, or trying to connect with our intuition that's inside of us, right? As as Einstein said, building on that quote, the most influential people that have ever walked among us first connect with their spiritual, their inner selves, and then only then do they connect with their physical selves. And as I've said before, and then only then do they become known as the most influential people that have walked among us, right? And then some of you are probably saying, I don't want to be the most influential, and that's fine too. No one says that. No one says you needed to be. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that these people that we look up to in our societies, these people that we look up to in our lives, whether they be famous or not famous or just important in our own lives, they have a connection with their intuition. They have a connection with what's inside to where they can express their feelings and they can be genuine and they can be real. Can we be real with one another? Right? It's like when we're authentic, we're so much more engaged. When we're authentic with one another and in conversations, and there's no fakeness, there's no facade. There's no facade. It's just our genuine selves, and we're expressing that. It's just such a more memorable discussion, and to even have the awareness first to be present in that discussion without looking at our phones is the first step. Is the first step, right? And so, and I'll admit, like that was me. That was me. I would be in a meeting, or I'd be at lunch, or I'd be at dinner. I'd even be in a conversation with my wife, and we're both on our phones. Nothing wrong with that. But like, is it possible that another opportunity exists to be present and to be engaged and to see what that feels like? And if there's some of us out there, and those of us out there that have that connection, that feel that intuition, that have, if not an incredibly strong feeling of that or sense of things, then it's something that we've felt on occasion. But that's something that I'm here to tell you that, at least in my experience, and I believe in my heart and my soul, that that's something that we can build. We can, and talk about leverage. What? Leverage? We can leverage this energy. This energy is real. This is the energy of life. Energy of life. What? Tell me about it. I know this is crazy. This guy's flailing his arms and doing all this stuff and talking so fast and has all this energy. This is the energy of life. I feel genuinely like I have the energy of a child with the awareness of an adult. What? That's incredible. I still say that, and my guy just got goosebumps again. This is like, it's incredible to even conceive that that's a thing. You asked me this 6 or 8 months ago, is that something possible? I'd say, what the hell are you talking about, man? Go away. That's crazy talk. But now and today, absolutely. Absolutely. And the incredible thing is it's continuing to grow. The feeling is blossoming. I've mentioned in a previous episode, the first time I meditated, my body was like tingling like a tuning fork. That doesn't happen to everybody, depending on the level of intensity that we can get into on certain meditations. But I can tell you now that it's gotten more intense. It's like, and it's different every time. But I can tell you, over time, it's nature. It's just nature. Me looking everywhere. That's birds. That's butterflies. That's squirrels. That's all that stuff. So thank you for allowing me to do that as I digress and appreciate that's around us. But yeah, it's like, it's incredible. It's like, again, it's like an instrument that I'm just learning how to play just now, and to be able to express that and be able to feel that and to be able to engage with people and not be uncomfortable in circumstances with people I've never met before. That was not me. That was not me. I wanted nothing to do with those circumstances. I barely wanted to speak. And it got better as I got older, where I was more engaged, and it was just like, it was pleasantries, and there were certain moments of engaging conversation, absolutely. But now, it's like, it's on another level, and it's just so rewarding, and time flies. There's no time. Time doesn't exist in these moments in which this energy is expressing like this. It's like we before we know it, it's already been, whatever, and who cares, because no one's paying attention, because we're so engaged. Nobody cares about that. And it starts to be something that we think about less and less, and we're trying to say, how do I get into more present moments? How do I look at Einstein's theory of relativity and say, what can I do with this? Who cares? Like, why should I care about this? Really? Like, why should I care about the theory of relativity? Who cares? Great that he figured it out. I'm no scientist. I don't really care. Why should I care? Well, when it's defined as something that we can be in the positive flux of, and we don't think about time, why wouldn't we and as I've said previously, we use these words and these words have these labels. I'm only using relativity as a word for us to get excited, about something that somebody so intelligent and so influential in our society for the last 100 years has came up with and discovered. And as Einstein says, logic only takes you from A to B. Imagination takes you everywhere. Imagination takes you everywhere. Everywhere. And so I don't know how far I strained off from that original question, Riley, but I hope I answered it. But I just want to emphasize, like, we talk about a lot of things on our show and, a lot of different people, but there's a common thread. The common thread is so many different people said so many different things that are very much alike. So many people accomplished so many incredible things that are very much alike. And if we take those things that have happened, those choices that were made, those thoughts and feelings that originated, and then the actions that were taken, and then all of those things that actually happened, and we look and we try and connect those dots, it all comes to having an awareness of like, what is it that I'm doing here right now? What is what am I doing, and why am I doing it? And challenging ourselves to ask that. And a lot of times we're not going to have that answer right away. And that's okay. But if we don't, then tomorrow ask it again. And the next, and it doesn't have to be every day. It could be 2 weeks from now. It could be 2 years from now. Everybody's on their own path. Everybody does their own thing. Everybody makes their own choices. That's totally cool. And that's the best thing about life is we're all in our own world. We're all in our own world, right? And the less we give, the less we focus on everything around us. And not to say that it's not important, not to say that it's not valuable, not to say that there isn't elements of that are integral to our lives. Absolutely. But can we start with us first? If every one of us made choices towards things that we want, and then every one of us started to make more selfless choices and choices out of love and not out of fear, what would happen? Imagine that. Right? Like the community episode, Chaos Theory. What was that name of that episode, Riley?
I think Remedial Chaos Theory.
Yes, I watched that episode. It was 22 minutes. They threw the Yahtzee, all these crazy things happened in 5 instances. And the one instance where everybody was kind of going with the flow and was very supportive and everything was so much like it. It's incredible. And these shows that are out there that are starting to do that more, like Everything Everywhere All at Once, that movie, Natasha Lyonne, your 2 shows, all these things are out there, and these things are happening, and they're happening more and more frequently. And it's incredible to see, Big Door Prize. What? These people go line up at a machine, and then they tell them their life potential, and then they realize that it hasn't been clearly articulated in the show, but I see it, is that the life potential that's told by them by the machine is based on their awareness now. That can change. In a moment, right? And to realize that actually is reality. That is reality. And talk about a way of art and communicating and conveying that to society. And listen, I'll be the first to admit is some people and a lot of people, and this is totally cool, like aren't ready for that. And everybody's ready for that at their own time if they're even. And it's okay to never be. And there's no judgment, there's no, anything whatsoever. But, for those of us that are there, that are in it, that realize that get excited about that, what? All potentials exist. And, I can get excited about one little thing that I achieved today. And then there's some days as I was happened to me this week where I had such a great morning, and then I had a great early afternoon, and something happened in the early afternoon that I struggled with for several hours. I'm like, man, this is not happening. I had an expectation of it happening a certain way, and I didn't get beyond 2% of what I wanted to achieve because I thought it was going to be a certain thing. And I was just so disappointed. And I was like, man, I thought this was going to be easier. I thought this was going to be a little bit less challenging. And I just I got into a mood, and it was like, what? Why am I doing this? And I had to get snap out of it. I had to snap out of it. I had to get into that awareness and say, all right, what's going on? Look at your day. You had an amazing morning. You did this, you did that, you accomplished this, you accomplished that because of one thing that you had an expectation. I had an expectation of something, and I thought I wanted to achieve X, and I achieved 0.01% of X. Right? And I got upset, and I allowed that to consume my thoughts for, like, I would say, honestly, a few hours, and I was upset. Right? And so, it's being able to have the command of our thoughts and realize we have that potential. We have that power. We have that power, right? And that power originates with what's inside. The energy that we have, that's what's inside. And that's something that we can build a relationship with. That's something that we can leverage. Imagine we connect with our intuition, and then we have something that guides us. We have something that we're not having to question or overanalyze or overthink about things. I used to overanalyze everything. Every single little thing needed to be overanalyzed. Every single little thing. Now are there things I analyze? Absolutely. But I'd say it's 90%, 90% going with my what I feel that's the right thing to be doing, and trusting myself. And that's the thing, is that we second guess ourselves, and even when things aren't, and especially when things aren't happening as fast as we want, you're probably sitting there saying, well, Joe, I tried thinking, I tried feeling, I tried this meditation stuff, but it's not happening. What's happening? To that, I say, I get it. That happens to me, right? I do that. I go through that. I occasionally let go daggers of doubt and throw spears of fear at my own thoughts and feelings. It's just something that we've been conditioned as a society to do. Whether it's too good to be true, or whether it's something that, because it hasn't happened yet, we start to have doubts, right? It's a matter of trusting that we own the outcome. This is what we want. And then trusting the universe to own the process. Trust the universe to own the process. And again, this is a journey. This is a journey. This is not, we're all here on this journey of life. And looking at life in a way of with gratitude and with appreciation, and with, the little things, looking at the little things of a flower, a butterfly, a bird, nature. It's like when we get immersed in nature, something changes within us. I think I feel that. I was at a dinner last night. We were talking about this, and it was a business dinner, and they said, and one of the questions somebody asked to kind of get everybody engaged in the discussion was, if you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you do? And I had to think about that. And the first thing I said is, I kind of like what I do now. Like, do I have? They said, no, you got to pick something else. And I'm like, all right, well, I would just want to be in nature. And then the jolly Italian next to me says, like a hippie? And I'm like, no, see, you're labeling me already because I want to be in nature. I'm a hippie? No, I just want to be in nature to appreciate what it is that has such an element of perfection in every moment built into it, right? Whether it's, one of the most incredible experiences I've had in my life was my wife and I went to San Francisco, and we happened to go on a detour one day to Muir Woods, where these giant redwoods and, a beautiful park. And I've never experienced anything like that up until that point from a nature perspective. And it was just so transformative and beautiful and peaceful and just like awe-inspiring. And then someone shared that they went to Glacier National Park in Montana, and it was like rekindled the feelings of when he was there, and like the awe-inspiring thing of the awesomeness and the grandness of that, right? That look at this, and that it's not just a landscape on my computer. Like, this is right in front of me. You know what I mean? It's like literally, look at this thing. It's incredible. And at the largest scale and in that smallest scale too. I can't remember if it's Emerson, or it's one of these writers who talked about being in nature, and he talked about the word sauntering, and to saunturn is to like walk through nature and appreciate it in a way in which we might not have ever seen before, because we're focused on other things. Right. And Riley, can you check that? I can't remember. I think it's Emerson. That is it.
If he referred to nature as a universal being in many of his lectures.
Is it Emerson?
I'm not seeing anything with sauntering, but I may have.
Yes. It might have been Thoreau. It might have been one of these. But if you look up sauntering, sauntering nature, whoever was by the lake. Man, see what happens? You just ask one question with 30 minutes. I don't even remember what the original question. Did I answer the question?
I think we got to it. So here's another thing that I think I find since listening to this show, and I think one of the greatest things that you've said on this show, or since being part of the show, one of the greatest things that you've said on the show is, let's start with the baseline of perfection. And since really keeping that in my mind, day in, day out, and all the things that Steve Harvey says, of course, as well. But I think one of the things that I've really come to appreciate is that I think, people really like sports, professional sports, because I think those are people who are at the absolute top of their game. And if you look at it in a certain way, I think it is people who we're watching these accomplished athletes really live in these moments of what seem like spontaneous perfection. But really, it's something that they have put a mindset towards and have cultivated to a point where they are at the very top of their game. And that is why people like it so much, is you're witnessing something that would not be possible unless people cultivated this mindset over and over and over again, and sort of tilled that soil, planted the seed, grew it to the point where they can do something at such an incredible level. And one of the things that you always say about the show is that we're putting sparks out there. We're putting sparks out there for people to sort of get there. So, like, how do people start, or how did you start noticing spontaneous moments of perfection? Where did that come from for you, and how did you grow that feeling into something where you felt like it was, becoming more and more of your life?
To be completely honest, I can't recall exactly when I first had that notion. But if I reflect back, as I mentioned on my trip to Muir Woods, I looked at that. I didn't realize it at the time, right? It's like I was in it and I appreciated it and I enjoyed it, but I didn't reflect on it so much as to understand what that meant and what that could mean in my life, and how I might be able to change my perspective on that, right? And I think that only when I made the conscious choice to meditate on everything else except for what's outside in my world, and focus on just being silent and being quiet and having stillness, right? Like, only then did I start seeing things and having a different lens on things. And it was almost like once I started doing that, and I started focusing in, and I started being still and taking 20 minutes a day originally, and then still having the, it's like we say, having the discipline. Again, I was at dinner last night, incredible people. And, we talked about discipline, and, this young woman, she was in the Army, for 6 years, and, incredible person. And she's people talk about discipline, or like, it's like this regimented thing. You got to do this, you got to do that. No, it just means own your shit. It just means own it. And if you're going to do it, do what you say you're going to do. It's literally that simple. Right. And then allowing yourself and giving yourself credit when we do that. Right. And so if we can only when I was able to connect consistently with stillness, with silence, with and in the beginning you're saying, I'm saying stillness and silence, but I use guided meditations. Is that a contradicting thing? No, because it's like that guided meditation, for originally, as I mentioned in a previous episode, Bob Proctor, the abundance meditation, that's 20 minutes. Like that was my start. Like that helped me focus on things that that were not anything I've really thought about before for a period of time, to focus on and think about my body and thinking about, this he calls it like a lavender energy, cleansing and going all throughout your body. It's like these simple things. You're like, oh, it's lavender energy. What the hell? That's not real, whatever, but again, if the mechanics of quantum physics that have been qualified and tested say that how you think and how you feel, why not? Again, because it's a mystical thing that's not of what we visually see with our eyes and our feel with our and hear and touch with our senses, and we don't believe it. That's discounting so much that makes it such a limited perspective. That's allowing us to only dictate our world by the 5% of stuff we actually see. 95% of what all that is, we can't even see. We don't know what it is. Right. So only when I was able to consistently do that was I able to start looking at the small things. And when I was reading certain things from Joe Dispenza and Bob Proctor and Deepak Chopra and all these other people that and starting to put some of the pieces together and starting to see that, they did that too. They appreciated the small things every once in a while, and here's the interesting thing is that a lot of times these people started realizing the small things way later in life. And they would say that. And I'm like, well, why can't we do that now? And then realizing that when we appreciate those small things, that it starts to frame our perspective differently. It starts to allow us to remove the cloudiness from around our soul, where our emotions are stored in our body. And if our soul that's within us and our spirit and our intuition and whatever we want to call this energy, like that's the energy that beats our heart. When someone dies, how do we qualify they're dead? Their heart stops beating, right? And that's the energy that beats our heart. That's the energy that pumps our blood. That's the energy, right? And so why can't it be that simple that when we connect and start feeling and connecting with that energy, that allows us to appreciate the simplicity of life, the perfection of that. I don't have to think about breathing. I'm thankful. Certainly there are people that have to do that, but on a general scale and scope of life, we don't have to think about pumping blood to every part of our body. We don't think about growing our hair. We don't think about growing our toenails. We don't think about when we walk, like our muscles moving in the way they got to move in order for us to walk. We just walk. We just walk. I just move my arms. I just do what I want to do. It's instantaneous. It happens right away. Right. So how is that not something that's perfect? It's reflecting. It was connecting with the energy first, and then starting to reflect on the world that I was in and seeing things around me and just the super simple things and of a flower and how perfect it is and how perfectly round and symmetrical, and then looking at the mechanics of the 50 to 70 trillion cells in my body, in all of our bodies, that just do what they got to do. Right? What? That in and of itself. And then we look out into the depths of space with the James Webb Telescope, and there's these galaxies that produce billions and billions of stars, yet within us we have 71 galaxy has billions of stars, but within us we have 50 trillion cells. What? And then looking at science and looking at the electron, this thing that's the electron, that's a fundamental particle, and it's not just a particle, it's a wave. When the electron was first discovered as a particle, the guy that discovered it, he got the Nobel Prize. You know what the funny thing is? His son also got the Nobel Prize. You know what? For what? For realizing the electron is not just a particle, but it's a wave. It's a wave too. It does both states, and also it's so round. The electron is so round that if what we measure today, and I've said this in a previous episode, if an electron was the size of the earth and the sugar crystal was an imperfection, we could find that. They spent decades trying to create the way to measure that, and they still can't find an imperfection. And the electron's lifespan is equivalent to 5 quintillion times the current age of the universe. What? Boom! Talk about a mind-blowing thing to conceive of. And that's and that negative charged particle is literally attached to every element of matter that exists in our body, in our worlds. What? What? How is that not perfection? Right? And to realize that our problems and our things, and we say, oh, that's not perfect. And yes, we all have a definition of perfection that we strive for and that we're trying to achieve. But in looking at perfection as a baseline, it's like, if we have the perspective that everything in our lives happens for us, then why is it not perfect? Because if it's happening for us, then it's happening. Then we're looking at is all right. What do I need to figure out here? What am I trying? What's the lesson in this? What's the thing I need to learn so I can improve my awareness, so I can improve my state of life, right? Or I just need to go through this to be able to understand a certain thing in a certain way that I wouldn't have understood it in any other way. And no matter how it could have happened in any other way, it wouldn't have been as meaningful. It wouldn't have resonated. I wouldn't have cared. I wouldn't have paid as much attention to it if it hadn't happened for me in this way, right? And so when we start to look at things like that, things just start to fall into place. As Steve Jobs said, and many others have said, it's like, we need to be able to look back on our lives and reflect on things and connect the dots, and then trust that the dots will connect in our future, right? But he's basically saying, trust the universe. If you keep again, if we can look back on our lives, and I think most of us can say, man, look at the incredible series of events that had to have happened in order for me to be right here with these set of circumstances. And for those of us that are feeling in a good place and are grateful for it, we can do that more easily than those that think, oh, I'm in the worst place possible or whatever, right? But if we can look at certain elements of our lives, that's the other thing, is can we break down certain elements of our lives that we feel that are, really great or at one point we're not great. So yeah, I was watching this. I came across this interview in which Giannis Antetokounmpo, I think I got that right. Giannis Antetokounmpo was asked a question by a reporter, and he was like, and his response was, and the question was something along the lines of, like we're not doing good and calling it a failure or something. I can't recall the question exactly, but Giannis, he was like, oh, man, really? You're asking me that question again? And he basically went into this explanation, and he said, listen, let me ask you something, Mr. Reporter. He's like, every day you work. What are you working towards? You're trying to get a promotion, right? So you didn't get a promotion this year. Are you a failure? Right? Did that happen? You're trying to provide for your family. Are you a failure because you didn't get a promotion this year? Right? He used Michael Jordan. He's like, Michael Jordan played 15 years in the NBA. He only won 6 championships. Is he a failure during those 9 seasons? No, he's not a failure during those 9 seasons. Right? And so he was adding perspective in such a unique and incredible way that I appreciated so much, because we ask ourselves these questions, we ask others these questions, we make criticisms, we make judgments of people, right? Because they're failures. No, right? And it doesn't need to be that way. And so if we looked at failures as opportunities for us to learn, as opportunities for us to understand an element of life that we would not have gained the level of understanding that we needed to if it didn't happen to us or for us in that specific way, why isn't that perfection? Right? Why can't that be perfection? And it's such, and that brings up another concept of understanding. It was so interesting. I was watching the Imagineering story on Disney Plus, and and it talked about that Walt Disney wanted to build these rides for the World's Fair in New York in 1964. And I thought it was so interesting that they said that the World's Fair in 1964 was supposed to usher in a new age of peace through understanding. What happened? What happened? That was in 1964. Did we forget about that? What happened? Why are we doing that more often? So often people don't want to try and understand. They just want to say what they want to say what they want to say without trying to understand perspective. Can we understand one another? Can we understand that everybody has a different perspective? Just as the sun shines on every one of us, and we all see it we all see the sun in a different way depending on where we are. Everybody has their own perspective. If we can try and understand everybody's perspective, wow, wow, and having that understanding and realizing that brings us back to the perfection of life, the perfection of things happening and happening for us, and again, that's a concept that I think even sometimes I challenge myself to think about and to understand and to appreciate. And there's a level of gratitude there that just has to exist at some level, that the flowers can bloom, the sun can rise, the trees can grow, the birds can fly, all these things happen in such an organic way without anybody getting involved, right? And then all these functions that happen in our bodies naturally without us having to think about it. Like, how is that not perfection? Crazy to not at least consider that perspective, right? At least consider it. And then if we can accept that, it's like so many of our worries in which we're chasing something that's perfection, like immediately dissolve and evaporate because we're not chasing something. We're able to be present. And of course, there's always things that we want to work towards, and always things that, you're probably saying, wait a minute. You just said we don't want to be chasing something, but then you say you want to be chasing. What I'm saying is that being present should be the priority always, because when we're present, we're not thinking about time, which is a constraint that constrains all of our lives. When we're present, we can appreciate the small things, because if we're being real and we're present, all we can conceive of is what's literally within our realm of our senses, right? Whether we can see, whether we can feel, whether we can touch, whether we can smell, right? And so can we start there? Can we start there and then start building on that, and then start trusting that when we feel things, we go with them more frequently. When opportunities present themselves in our lives, like a call I got from a friend last night, at 6:00 when I'm in the middle of cooking dinner. I need you to go to this dinner with me. I haven't heard from him in several months. What are you talking about? That's crazy. But you know what? I'm going to go because I haven't seen you in several months. And, it's a spontaneous thing, even though it's an hour and a half away. Let's go. Why not? Let's have an experience that I wasn't planning on having today. Why not? The universe gives us these things. And so often we say, no, because it's comfortable. And I can tell you from my experience that I would say no, absolutely, all the time. Absolutely. When we start to say yes to things and we start to go with the flow of things, it's like that becomes less uncomfortable. And what used to be uncomfortable becomes comfortable. And over time, a shift happens where we're not always looking. We're not always chasing something. We're present and we're working towards that in the present moment, but we're not chasing it because we're not disappointed because we aren't there yet. We're grateful for being here. We're grateful for having achieved and trusting who we are, and knowing who we are, and knowing what we're doing now and what we're feeling now, what we're thinking now is constructive towards what we want in our lives. Right. And that's like, it's like saying, God, like I'm creating my life. It's like we go from reacting to everything in our lives to creating our lives. Like, what? I can create my life? But I just have to be present. Yes, that's hard in the beginning because we're so used to it. We're conditioned over years and years, decades, our entire lives. That's all we've done. But just as easily as a building that took years to build can come down in seconds with the explosives, like we can start to make progress to be in a mindset and an awareness toward what we want, to where yes, perfection can be the baseline. And it's a level of perfection that we're constantly working on improving. And the perfection as a baseline literally is just qualifying it for this present moment. That's all it is. For this present moment, everything is perfect. For this present moment. And if the next present moment, we want to make it more perfect than a prior present moment, then great, because we planted a seed then to say we're going to make choices to then be in a future present moment that moment is more perfect than the prior moment. That's the perspective of perfection as a baseline. That's the perspective of constantly improving on that baseline. And then when we use it as a baseline, we remove the stress from ourselves. We burden ourselves with all this stress, right? We say perfectionist is like a disease. I say, for the way we've defined it as society, absolutely. But when we say we're starting with perfection and in every moment it's perfect and we're building on that, it's like the burden is gone. It's like we can breathe. We can just be. And then we can be fearless because we don't have to be afraid that it's not, the perfect the way that others might qualify it as. It's perfect right now. And that's what matters.